Hello again, everybody. Welcome back. This is the Good Bit Podcast. Thank you very much for downloading today's episode, and thank you very much if you're watching the video version on CM42 TV on YouTube. And if you're watching the video version, you'll be able to see my esteemed guest today, but if not, I'm sure you'll hear him in a matter of moments. But this is my good friend Daisuke Beppu from YouTube. Daisuke, how are you feeling today, my friend? Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, Chris, the pleasure is indeed all mine, really. Thank you very much for the kind invitation.
No, not at all. I've been, watching your channel for many years now. I think we connected, when was maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, time flies, but yes, I remember those conversations very fondly, and we connected, I think, over film, Jaws, a little bit wrestling, but yes. Has it been that long now?
I think it was 2018, if my memory serves me correctly.
Wow,
so going on 4 years. Yeah,
wow.
So we spoke about Jaws, which I think, like me, you love all 4 Jaws films. So as we get to, if we ever do Jaws on the podcast, feel free to come back and chat about them and try to defend our love for Jaws 3.
I love Jaws 3. Yes. Overman was killed inside the park. I'm sorry. Okay. Yes.
No, please. That is with a quote.
Yes. Thank you. You recognize the Jaws 3 quote. Thank you so much. No overtime. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm getting way ahead of myself. Yes.
You
One
mentioned
of these days, let's do a Jaws 3 discussion. I'd love that. I really love that.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned wrestling there as well, which is a big interest of mine, obviously. And last week on the podcast, we had Luke on the show from Razor Wire Reviews. And I told him, I've got Daisuke on next week. And Luke said, well, when you see him, can you tell him that Luke said, can you please do your Macho Man Randy Savage impression? And I was like, I don't want to put Daisuke on the spot, but Luke insisted that I ask you to do it.
My Macho Man. Oh, my goodness. Yes. Well, Luke, our dear friend, Razor Wire Reviews.
Yeah.
I love him. He's the best. And yes, that he was so kind to remember the whatever it was. Yes, it was, for those who know WWE, or at the time it was WWF.
Yes.
Right, wrestling. So it was Macho King, I think, had just lost his title and thus his claim to being Macho King, and he returned to Macho Man Randy Savage.
Right. And
that was also the time where he was with Sensational Sherry, at the time Sensational Queen Sherry, but then they had a falling out, and then it was the return of Miss Elizabeth to the squared circle, and Miss Elizabeth essentially threw out Sensational Sherry, and it was left the two of them in the ring, Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. After all this drama, there was a lot of drama to come, of course, but after all this drama had unfolded before them up to that point, and then will they or won't they get back together again? And she's pleading with him, please, let's get back together. And the crowd is cheering, what is he going to do? What is he going to do? And they just, and they embrace. And then that was it. And then sometime later on one of the shows, it was Mean Gene Okerlund had Miss Elizabeth and Randy Savage as guests. Mm-hmm. And Randy Savage was in the ring, and he got down on one knee, and he opened the box with the ring, and he says, and I apologize to your audience for the poor impersonation of what did he say? He said, Elizabeth, will you marry me? And the crowd's like, wow. And Miss Elizabeth is like, Mean Gene Okerlund's like, what you gonna do? She says, oh yeah, and the crowd went wild, and and they embraced, and then they got married. Yes, so sorry.
Yeah,
sorry
that was
to
great.
All of your audience. Okay. I apologize profusely.
First of all, I'm very impressed by the memory. Like, I don't know when the last time it is you watched wrestling, or when you watched that clip in particular of Macho Man, but I mean, that must have been a long time ago.
Long time ago when I was a kid, yes. But it left quite an impression, because that was a real moment. Yeah. And Bobby the Brain Heenan was there at WWF or WWE at the time, and Jake the Snake Roberts, and I think Hulk Hogan was still there, and Ultimate Warrior. So those are the days. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
I mean, that was a little bit before my time, but as a wrestling fan and historian, I've always looked back and, you know, appreciated it through watching documentaries and old footage and things like that. It's almost like watching old films, you know. It was before your time, much like the film we're going to discuss today, but it's before your time, but you feel like you owe it to yourself as a fan to go in and kind of, you know, update yourself on stuff from before, you know.
Exactly. And there's so much drama. There's so much drama in that squared circle.
Yeah.
Much like the drama that we see unfolding in cinema. I really mean that. Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
It's so, wow, what a world. And I'm so happy and so impressed that you keep up with the history of wrestling as well as cinema. Well done, my friend.
Thank you. Well, I mean, listen, keeping up with wrestling nowadays is even harder because there's so much to watch, you know. And we're back in the day, you just watch whatever you could get your hands on. Whereas now everything's so available to us, again, much like cinema. You know, when I was a kid, you know, I had VHS tapes and I had DVDs, and whatever you had was all you could watch. But now, literally anything, you could just Google a film, and it's, you know, if it's on a streaming service or if it's really cheap on Amazon, then you can have it within days, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, we are living also in a type of golden age in many ways.
True.
When we're speaking about, say, physical media and about all these things that are just we can watch now. You mentioned streaming, that's certainly the case, but also just the types of films that you can watch on a really easily accessible Blu-ray or DVD. That kind of thing. These sorts of films were really difficult to find back in, say, the 80s, you know, the VHS days, for example. I mean, it's a real golden age in many ways, I would say, definitely.
You mentioned, you know, physical media, and that was the main thing that kind of attracted me to your channel when I first saw your YouTube channel was the unbelievable collection of Blu-rays and DVDs that you own and laser discs. I think that's one of the things that you're really passionate about. And it's the Criterion Collection is your main focus. So tell us a little bit why you chose the Criterion Collection, what the thought process was behind collecting all of the films, and how easy do you find it to keep up with collecting the Criterion releases?
Oh, thank you very much for that. I think just very generally, I find, well, I've always been a fan of the Criterion Collection ever since, even before they began releasing DVDs.
Right.
But now they released DVDs, which now has become the current physical media catalog of DVDs and Blu-rays, and now 4K UHD with the spine numbering that is now over whatever it is, 1,100 and so. But back in the day, it was there were the DVDs, and then a little bit of exposure that I had to them, say, prior to that. But this was, again, one of the ways in which I was able to watch certain films, again, at the time, new emerging format of the physical media disc. So that was a very exciting time. And then also the Criterion Collection, I wasn't collecting the collection titles at the time, but I was finding very often that the Criterion Collection was offering all these titles that were the titles that I had always wanted to see, but were never available, never released on, say, disc, etc., never made available in these particular versions. And so that brought my attention, I think, to a lot that I could get out of purchasing some of these titles. And then it came to pass, I think, maybe many, many years later, when I was when I first discovered the Criterion Collection, I was still very, very young, much younger than I am now. I was a student, or however old I was when I first heard of it. But then many, many years later, I decided I got so much out of the Criterion Collection that I thought, oh, well, let's just try to maybe get those titles, maybe get some of those titles that I had come across some years back, and then watch the films, and then see if I could get a handle over this thing called cinema as expressed through the Criterion Collection. So that's just the general, I think, impetus for that. Now, I should say from the top there that I am the first to admit that the Criterion Collection is, I know, is not the be all end all of cinema, and I know that it's not meant to represent every single aspect of cinema, because cinema is too vast to be able to be fully, say, captured within one label or even a number of labels. It's impossible.
Right.
So I understand that. So just because I like the Criterion Collection, that doesn't mean I think that I have a handle on everything that is cinema related. On the contrary, my knowledge is very, 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 very shallow. But I think, that being said, I think just the idea too that having something to go to, like the Criterion Collection, which releases a number of titles monthly, is to me like what they had with, maybe book clubs, monthly book clubs, or
Okay,
curated collections. They'd have those things where you could mail in something, and someone would send you these titles every month or something. And so that is what it feels like to me. Like I can get my monthly dose, or monthly amount of films, and I can rely on the team at Criterion to make the selection for me and to curate it for me in that way. So that's how I think of it. And so I always try to keep that kind of perspective. Also because for me in particular, I find that my purchasing habits are such that if I do not have, say, that kind of say monthly group of titles from Criterion, say I would probably maybe make purchases that would totally be within my own bubble. Okay. Which is fine, which is completely fine for me, and I'm very happy because in terms of genres that I like, filmmakers that I like. But I would probably, just again, my own personal subjective approach to things, I would probably not venture so far out of my bubble if it were all voluntarily, in terms of if my purchases are all made sort of voluntarily on that basis, knowing what it is I purchased, knowing the films that I've seen, or knowing the films that I'm about to purchase, having seen all of them, I wouldn't be able to venture out of that bubble. So something like the Criterion Collection for me, therefore, where I wouldn't think about this sort of film for the longest time until it emerged here, or I don't know this particular filmmaker, I don't know this type of subcategory, et cetera, and all the supplements and all the avenues that it leads one down. I don't know these things, and so that is one way to bring me out of my bubble. And then the last thing, I'm so sorry to do this, but just one other thing too, which is, then why is it the Criterion Collection? Why not some other label like Arrow, or now all these emerging great labels like Eureka Cinema, or like Imprint, or Powerhouse Indicate, all these. And it's just it's just a matter of I do have a number of titles from those other labels, but for me it's just a matter simply of funds, of money. I don't have the funds to be able to devote everything, all my money to everything. So I don't do that. I'm a little bit more selective when it comes to, say, other things, but that's not to take anything away from any of those other great labels. I think those are really great labels. Like if I had to choose, if I had to choose one label just to do this sort of curated cinema selection and go along with them, would I choose Criterion? And the answer is I'm not sure, because there are so many other great labels out there that really are giving a wonderful choice. And oftentimes too, there's a great comparison. Maybe Criterion and this other like Arrow are releasing the same title in a different version. And sometimes the Arrow version will be very, very strong indeed. And so that means, maybe next time in a different life, maybe I could have gone the Arrow route. Who knows? I mean, but it's one of those things. Yeah.
That's really interesting in terms of comparing it to like a book club where it's you're not really sure what you're going to get every month if you haven't seen the film or heard about it, and then you can be like pleasantly surprised. But there's also that chance where you're not going to like the films, but that's okay too because it develops taste and opinions and things like that. And I think that's really interesting. I never chose a label to collect because, I was quite picky in terms of the stuff I wanted to watch. But at the same time, my hardest thing for me to do is sometimes choosing the film. Because as we said earlier on, there's so much to choose from now. How do you make that selection? Sometimes when it's done for you, it must be a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point that you bring up. And that also actually it does mean too that well, how should I put it? It does bring up, but you bring up two, I think, really key points, which is, well, the first thing is uh, things still aren't cheap. There
Right.
are these things can get rather pricey, and especially if you're thinking about overseas shipping and
Hmm.
building in the shipping cost as well as the title itself, et cetera, et cetera. It can build to something quite costly indeed. So one has to be selective. So on the one hand, you're absolutely right. When I was mentioning earlier the about being very specific about purchases and maybe not necessarily going outside of my bubble too much, that is actually a very justifiable position, I think, because of
Yeah.
the fact that things are very expensive and right and it's a risk. Purchases are a risk.
Yeah.
You make and it's not just titles. It's anything in life, right? You open your wallet, you take out your money,
Yeah.
and the risk is, are you going to get something out of this thing that you're purchasing that is worth you dishing out this money? I mean, that's the risk. It's risk reward, right? So, and the other thing too is the reward is something that is not necessarily tangible. You can't measure it in, say, dollars or euro or pounds, right? It
Yeah.
has to be something that you can feel or sense, but it's not necessarily what's the word, quantifiable.
Yeah.
So how do you justify that? And it gets harder and harder each time because, as you say, the choices out there are just becoming much more infinite
Yeah.
in terms of possibility. And even say with the same title, you have a same title, but then one has to consider what is the version that is quote unquote preferred,
Yeah.
which is the version that is quote unquote the most faithful to the intended original version. And I'm using air quotes here because that also can be a very delicate and quite complex discussion.
Yeah. And
And that
subjective.
also involves, exactly. I'm sorry. Yes, please. Yes, exactly. Yes.
I was just going to say it's very subjective in terms of like what you're going to pick as well. Everybody's opinions and tastes are different. So, if they're giving you, these different versions, how do you make that choice? Which one is best for you? You're not going to know until you have it.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. And of course, there are so many great resources out there, so many people who uh, pay attention to all the details about a particular version, about something that was restorations, especially in this age of restorations and
Yeah.
digital restorations. This is becoming a very hot topic. And it's a hot topic because uh, uh, there's all this technology too that makes it possible for people to really examine the aspect ratio or the color
Yeah.
or the sound design and that sort of thing, which is incredible, which is really incredible. But as you say, it also means that as a consumer or as a purchaser, one needs to, what's the phrase, one needs to be on one's game, as it
Yeah.
were, and
Yeah.
always be on the lookout for what it is that one needs to pay attention to here versus there. And sometimes that can, or a lot of times for me, that can be a very, very difficult conversation to keep up with.
Yeah.
And then, as I say, or as you mentioned, to put on top of that the price, the cost point. How much are we willing to spend for something? And we have to be sure that it's something that is
Yeah.
what's the phrase, a well-informed purchasing decision. So it becomes this sort of thing. But right, but this is, I think, true for anything in this age, not just physical media, not just films, but just anything. Right, we have to go at it. We have to think about it. We have to examine. We have to do the research, and then we have to make our decision and then based on that, will we or won't we be able, or be willing, I should say, will we or won't we be willing to, as I say, open up our wallet and pay the money? And then sometimes it might be worth it. Sometimes I'll keep my wallet closed and go to this next shop. But thank you very much.
Yeah. How's the channel going then? Like just in general, because you always have these recurring series where you talk about the different releases of the Criterion Collection, but you're also just doing this long series of James Bond live streams talking about all the Bond films. Recently, I got the big Bond set on Blu-ray with all the films. I've only seen a very little amount of them, so I'm looking forward to really going on that journey. And whether it's on the Good Bit or it's on the YouTube channel or whatever, I'd like to kind of document my progress watching the films as well. So the fact that you did the live stream for pretty much them all, right? All the Bond films.
Yes, the feature films. Yes.
Yeah. So how was that? How did that go? How did the interactions of like the live streams with the viewers go in terms of a recorded format of video?
Oh, it was. I thought it was exciting. I thought it was a very splendid time, and I don't know. I mean, I hope people enjoyed it. If not, I apologize. But I thought it was a really. I really enjoyed it because it was an opportunity to talk about this stuff, these films that I was watching ever since I was a kid, and just I wasn't necessarily thinking about tying it in with the release of the newest film necessarily, right. But just due to various delays that happened in terms of the release of that, it just fell into place like that in terms of the discussion of the films leading up to the discussion of the most recent release. And I thought it was timely in that respect. So, but overall, I thought it was, for me, I enjoyed it very much. There's something to be said about speaking about a film in a live stream format in real time, and it was always early morning for me, so I'd wake up earlier than usual on a Sunday. And everyone would still be asleep in my house, and I just wake up early and just get going. And so it would take me a while to maybe get into it, but then it would be a lot of fun to just let loose, and just relax and just talk about these things and all the things that were people were talking about too. Oh yeah, that moment in that film, that it was a lot of fun, and I felt, in a good way, I felt it was keeping me on my toes, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Bond film?
Oh my goodness, I have a few. Maybe I should, before I should answer that, let me ask you, what films have you seen so far?
I don't want you to be disappointed in me. I've seen Dr. No, Goldfinger, and all of the Daniel Craig ones, and that's it.
Well, that's great. That's a lot of films. So, Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, Spectre, and No Time to Die, and Dr. No, and Goldfinger. Yes. So I think you have, if you're going to continue on your Bond journey, I think I'm a big fan of the Roger Moore era.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the Roger Moore era, because that was when I was a kid growing up in the 80s. He was Bond. And he and Timothy Dalton were my James Bonds. It's just like, who is your Doctor Who? It's like, who is your James Bond, right? So who is the Doctor? Excuse me. Who is the Doctor in Doctor Who? Who is your favorite Doctor? And then who is your favorite James Bond? And so the Roger Moore era and then the Timothy Dalton era were, for me, the ones to go to. So I could say, and then also George Lazenby, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then the Roger Moore era films in particular. I'm a big fan of A View to a Kill. It doesn't get a lot of love usually, I think, but I think it's great. And then any of the Timothy Dalton films, in particular Living Daylights. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts about those films as you progress forward through your James Bond.
I'll definitely keep you posted. And if you want to jump on another episode to talk about one in particular, please do. I'd love to hear.
Oh, I'd love to. Yes. Oh, that would be wonderful. Yes.
In terms of you mentioned growing up and watching Bond and things like that. What about when you first got into film and when you first got to the cinema for the first time? Any early cinema memories that you have? Do you have like a story for the first time that you went to the cinema?
So I don't unfortunately remember the very first film I saw. I don't remember the first film I saw in the theater. So I I, I think, and I mean, I have these memories of certain films that I might have seen in the theater, but now as I'm getting older, my memories are becoming much hazier. But the I think I could say, for instance, I mean, what was what was I was a kid. Um, I mean, I remember seeing. Okay. I remember seeing or being to the theater, going to the theater, or my parents taking me to theater, or whatever, to see Jaws 3. I'm thinking,
Yes, we love this.
I'm thinking, yes, and I'm thinking, what? I'm thinking years later, I'm thinking, there's no way I would take I mean, like, wow, that's amazing. I was able to go to the theater to see that kind of film. It's a great film, but I think that's one of the reasons why it stuck with me,
Yeah.
is because I saw it at such a young age. That, and if we're speaking of three films, I saw Superman 3 in the theater, and I don't remember too much about it except there's one scene in particular that's to this day it traumatizes me. Um, and so it's very memorable in that way. So Jaws 3, I remember seeing, or I have vague memories of going to the theater seeing. Superman 3, also Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. I remember going to the theater. For some reason, I have a memory of going to the theater. We entered the theater late, so we had already started, but we weren't. It was in still what was called the pre-title sequence of the film, or what one could call the pre-title sequence of the
Yep.
film. So I remember going to see Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. So these are the films in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And I think I went to see Return of the Jedi as well in the theater, but again, that memory unfortunately is not so clear to me now. But this would be, yeah, that would fall around that time. So what, 83? So early
Yeah.
80s would be this time when I first started to go to the theater. That I remember too, my mom and my dad and we went to see Supergirl, the film Supergirl, in the theater. And for whatever reason, we were the only people in the theater.
Right.
Supergirl. And ever since then, we'd always talk about that moment. I remember when we saw Supergirl and we were the only ones in the theater. Ha ha ha! Wasn't that a fun time? And so that became a bonding experience for us to talk about, even years after the fact. Going to see Supergirl. I enjoyed the film, by the way. Faye Dunaway and Peter O'Toole and Helen Slater. So it's a lot of fun. But yeah, so those are some of the memories. So I'm a child of the '80s.
Yeah.
And so some of these early 80s films, having these vague memories of going to see in the theater. Police Academy 4, too. I think Police Academy 4 was one that I saw in the theater. So that was around the time where I think the Police Academy films were becoming less, maybe, risque.
Okay, yeah.
They became more PG around Police Academy 3 or so. And so I don't think I saw Police Academy 3 in the theater, although I did see Police Academy 3 on videotape. But then I think, yeah, Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol, excuse me, COP.
Yeah,
Citizens
very good.
on
Yes.
Patrol, yes.
That's interesting. No, not at all. But I mean, when you're a kid and a film franchise that you really like starts becoming a little bit more PG, it starts to be a little bit more uncool, isn't it? You don't want it to be as PG. That's really interesting, though. You saw Star Trek 3, Superman 3, Jaws 3, Return of the Jedi, which is the third Star Wars film. So that's all number 3, and then Police Academy 4.
Yeah. And also I saw Jaws 4, and I shouldn't say Jaws 4, Jaws the Revenge in the theater as well. So this came a little bit later. Yes.
Yeah.
Jaws the Revenge. That was also a very memorable theater experience. And I must say, I think these theater experiences really helped or not helped, but they definitely formed the basis for my enjoyment and love for these films. So Jaws 3 and Jaws the Revenge. I just just speak about Jaws: The Revenge, the movie theater experience. It was so much fun. The crowd, I remember, was cheering. They were clapping and they were laughing. With I don't want to go into too many details, but as you know, the film, there's a moment that there's a moment that involves a plane in the middle of the ocean and Michael Caine. And when that happens, and then there's a scene when it resolves itself, the cheers in the audience, everyone was like clapping, yes, it was a wonderful thing. And so yes, I remember that film. Whenever I think of film Jaws: The Revenge, I think of that moment. Hoagie, right, is his name. Hoagie,
yes, that's right. Yeah.
And that turned me off. That film turned me off to banana boats for the rest of my life. I have never been on a banana boat ever since I saw that film. I don't think I've ever been on a banana boat.
I was going to say, were you a big banana boat fan before?
Probably not, but even if I were, that probably, yes, that sunk the stock of banana boat in my eyes forever.
No pun intended. So Jaws, I love all 4 Jaws films for different reasons. I don't know if it's just because I'm not particularly scared of sharks. I'm not scared of water. I like the idea of the films, especially the first one. And a couple of years ago, the local cinema here started showing classic films. And I said, that the one film I would love to see in the cinema is Jaws. And then lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, we are now showing Jaws at the cinema. And it was the warmest day of the year in Glasgow. It was like 32 degrees on a Saturday. Everybody's out, sunbathing, playing, running around, having a good time. And me and my dad went and sat and watched Jaws in the cinema. And it was one of the best cinema experiences that I've ever had, because I'd watched Jaws, maybe not as a child, but when I was a little bit younger with my dad, and we kind of bonded over that film. And then getting to see it in the cinema together was really nice. And then in 2021, they were also, when it was like the cinemas were coming back after the pandemic and things like that, they were trying to show bigger films that were going to get people back to the cinema. And they showed, like Back to the Future, and they showed big films like that, like The Matrix as well, with the new one coming out, E.T., and they also showed Jaws again. And this time I took my girlfriend who had never seen Jaws, and I was like, this is a big moment in our relationship. I said, at this point forward, this will determine how our relationship goes. We could have lots of arguments. We could have lots of important moments in life. But if you do not like Jaws, that could be the end of things.
And dare I ask, what was the verdict? Or should I not go there? I'm sorry.
No. She really enjoyed it. She really enjoyed it, which was good. But that story would have been a lot funnier if I was just like, I'm now a single man. But no, she did enjoy it. It was a little bit dated, and I do think that is 1975 though. But I still like it. It's the charm of it, I think, and because I love that film so much, I even really like the second one as well. Those are films that
I do too.
I describe them as films that you can just put on. Say for example, if you're scrolling through channels on the TV and it's just it's been playing for an hour, and it's already on, you would just watch it from where it's at. It's like one of those ones. It doesn't matter what point, you can just enjoy Jaws at any point.
Yeah, I totally am on board with your sentiment for the Jaws films. Jaws 75 was and is just a landmark. So in so many ways, I have seen that film. I can't tell you how many times, and just little things like at the the very beginning when Chief Brody is talking to that young boy or that young man about the missing girl at the time, and he's like, oh, so she ran out on you, and he's like, no, sir, and like, oh, I never noticed just how confident that young man is in his own kind of sexual prowess, I suppose. Right. But anyway, and then also Jaws 2, that's great. The inflatable boat guy, I love that guy, and then his, oh, someone popped your balloon. Yeah, no problem. The junk cart. Oh, okay, get him out of the water. And then, like the other part, I'm so sorry about this, but like one of what's his name? I'm sorry, I'm blanking out his name. What's his name? The mayor. Oh gosh.
Hang on.
I should have been prepared. Larry Jr. Larry Jr. and his friend Bob, right? And they're on the boat. all these boats, and then the shark kind. You have to watch the film. It's really great. It's really great. And then like the shark attacks, and then Bob, Larry Jr.'s friend, like Bob falls in the water, and like Larry's like Bob. But then at the same time, Sean, the little boy, Sean right. Brody, he then also falls. And everyone's like, Sean. No one's talking about Bob, right? Just Larry's like, Bob. And like, Sean. Everyone's going to Sean. So like, oh, Sean. Sean. And then Bob, right? So, and I always felt something for Bob at that particular moment. Because like, if I were Bob, I would think, hey, wait, listen. I'm in the water too. Someone shout out my name more.
I fell first.
I fell first. I'm all with Sean. I want Sean to survive too. But hey, listen, I'm still in the water. But anyway, that's it. Yeah, sorry about
that. The scene in Jaws 2 with the girl Jackie, played by Donna Wilkes, where she's like locks herself in the wee kind of cupboard thing after the shark attack, and then they find her and she's like shivering and she's in shock. That scene traumatized me as a young boy.
Oh,
she's so.
Is it Jackie? Is it Jackie or is it Tina? Is it Tina? Tina's Joy? Is that the name of the boat? I'm sorry.
It was Tina. It just says on IMDb. It may be Jackie, but I don't know. It could be Tina.
Jackie. There was Jackie who was who was visiting Amity, and she had. I think Jackie was the one who was very, very, very emotionally upset whenever the shark would attack.
This person would
just be like, yeah. And then Tina was she was Miss Amity, right?
Okay.
And she was the one who had, what was the name of her boyfriend? Tina and Eddie, right? And they would be sailing in Tina's Joy. That was the name of the boat. Yeah.
Yes, very good.
Huge event. Is it right? It was a huge event that happened in the middle of that film, and it led to and she was shivering in the middle in the cupboard there, right?
Yeah.
And like, oh, what's wrong to you? Oh, yeah, the
that's the one.
yeah. And like I always remember as a kid, I was like, wait, what did she say? Because it wasn't clear. It was I know she said shark, but she was so upset and she said shark, and she kind of finished the word in Mrs. Brody's shoulder. So it's like it's kind of muffled up. So I never quite caught what she said as a kid, but later on, of course, I understood that she meant shark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do love those films too. We should definitely do a special on the Jaws films. Yes. All right.
Cable Junction. Yes, I'm so sorry. Yes, Cable Junction, and the guy, the Harbor Patrol helicopter pilot with that great beard.
Yeah, that's a great beard.
I'm sorry about that. Yes.
No, listen, I always have time for Jaws talk. That's absolutely fine. All right, so we were discussing what films to talk about today, and I have this set here, this Alfred Hitchcock masterpiece collection. I got it for my birthday a few years ago, and I've still not seen all the films. I'm yet to watch. Let's see, Torn Curtain, The Birds, never seen The Birds, Frenzy, Family Plot, Marnie. Not seen those films, however, the rest I have seen. And my favourite Hitchcock film may be Rear Window. And there's a lot of great Hitchcock films. I know you love Vertigo.
Yes,
I think
very much so.
The first one that I saw, I think, was Psycho. So there's all these classics, like obviously like North by Northwest and The Birds are also two very popular and well-known Hitchcock films that I'm yet to see. But that excites me. I quite like the fact that I've not seen a lot of them because it's like still to discover them. But we decided on Rear Window. What is your memories of first discovering Hitchcock films? Is it someone that you've always admired his films, or was that is it a later discovery? Where do you sit on Hitchcock films?
Oh, Hitchcock. Oh, thank you very much for that. Yes, and I must also echo your sentiment about that wonderful set that you had. That is a really great set. For introduction into the world of Hitchcock films, as well as for people who already know and have seen the Hitchcock films a number of times. I mean, that is a great set for anyone in whatever point one finds oneself in the Hitchcock cinema journey. So well done for being able to get that set. And I think for me, yes, it was. It was always, Hitchcock films were always in the air whenever I was growing up. So you mentioned Psycho or something. Like, I can't remember the first time I saw Psycho. So it's just always been there. And the same is true, I think, for Rear Window. I can't remember the first time I saw Rear Window. There's always been around. They had those VHS tapes of those. And again, if my memory is wrong, please correct me. But I seem to always remember, Rear Windows VHS, the Universal MCA releases, and that had I think faded yellow cover. I think Vertigo was associated with the color blue, or somebody else had films like The Troubled Harry, and North by Northwest, and The Birds.
Yeah.
And many of these films that were available on VHS. So I just would be watching these constantly. And there would be other purchases that we made, that my mother bought VHS tapes of, say, Rebecca, Spellbound, Notorious. So these were in the 40s. And these were after Hitchcock came to the U.S. and began to work within Hollywood at the time with Selznick and others. But then, so it was just a period in my life where these films would be made. Not all of them, but a good number of them would be made available just to watch on VHS. And one of those films was Rear Window.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what I love about Rear Window is it's almost like, I don't know much about Hitchcock. As I say, I've only seen the few that I have, but it's almost like the quintessential Hitchcock film because, there's not too much going on. It's very set in the one area, but the suspense is all still there. It's more based on reactions. It's more based on like the story progressing through the conversations between the relationships of the characters and things like that. And that's why I really enjoy this one more than say Psycho, or even Psycho's kind of mainly in the one area when she arrives at the motel and stuff. But you know what I mean? Just in terms of like you have to like really engage with the characters. You have to follow the story and listen, to what they're saying, and then you are invested immediately in the people. And then when something risky happens to the people, then you care more. I think Hitchcock did a great job with that. I know it was like suspense and tension was his trademark, and I think Rear Window does a brilliant job with that stuff.
Oh, that's a really interesting and astute observation. That is really interesting. Yes, there is I do like that because there is a way that also Rear Window is in many ways, as you say, a type of quintessential Hitchcock film. One of those reasons, I think, which has been talked about many, many times by many critics and scholars and academics and Hitchcock experts, is the fact that it is, very technically speaking, quite a grand technical achievement, which is made, I think, quite remarkable by the fact that it is, there are very many almost self-imposed sorts of quote-unquote limitations in terms of how the film is being shot, how the film is being, how the stories are being presented. It's very famously known as being the set, or this constructed area of this essentially this maybe apartment complex community. And you have different rooms that are being portrayed through the windows that are seen in the distance. Well, this is all being constructed, and all these things that are going on have to be well timed, well paced, well lit, and then also they have to go on precisely in sort of in sync, as it were. And they all have to be telling themselves their own story, while at the same time, as you say, having to deal with or focus on the James Stewart character and his interactions with Grace Kelly and Thelma Ritter, etc. But that becomes also very limited in terms of the space. The limitations of the space involved, not least, of course, brought about not least of which by the fact that the character is himself stuck in the wheelchair, as it were, because of his injury.
Yeah, it's a good point, because you're watching everything happen at one point and one space, but the character is also, wheelchair bound and can't move around. So he's also, dealing with that, and he's nosy to the other neighbors, and it makes you kind of curious to what's going to happen with the other neighbors, which, you don't want to admit, but you do end up watching them and think, oh, I wonder where that story's going to go, or you might want to develop that character a little bit more and things like that. But in terms of Rear Window, the first time I saw it, I was in drama college at the time, And we were given this like extra class. It was called film theory. And it was like an evening class, and they managed to develop it into another qualification that would go on to the end of our degree that we were studying for. So we were very lucky. And the person who kind of developed this was a guy called Ian Grieve, who's been on the show before. And he would choose the film. So what would happen is for film theory, you would go to the cinema theatre style room that was at our drama college, and we would watch, a classic film or an important film. And then the whole process of the class would be just a discussion. Like, what did you think? And you would write a wee essay and things like that. And he would try and pick films that weren't, really well known and maybe dated and things, just to kind of develop your opinions a little bit of the students. So we watched films like Pleasantville. I don't know if you've heard of Pleasantville. We watched Thelma and Louise, which is a big film, but I hadn't seen it at the time. We watched American Beauty at one point. One day we watched The Big Lebowski, which I thought was a strange choice, but it was a lot of fun. But then one of the ones that really stuck out to me was Rear Window, and I'd never heard of Rear Window at the time. And I'd heard of the name Hitchcock, of course, but I'd never heard of this film. And, he described the film to you, and he would say that this wheelchair-ridden photographer is sitting there just looking out of his window, and we're thinking, what is the intrigue in this film going to be? How exciting is this going to be? It was a long day of classes, and then you're going in to watch a film. You're thinking, I want it to be exciting. You want it to hold your attention. What's the film going to be about a guy sitting looking out his window? And as the film went on, the way where you're starting to have an opinion on the film, and then there's like a moment that really changes it, and it really makes it like you immediately take more attention, and you really go, oh yes, now okay, I'm in. And it did take a while for me to really, embrace this film. And it's when Grace Kelly's character first goes into the apartment of, what's his name? I watched this the other day. Thorwald. And, she's in danger, and you're sitting worrying about it. And, we were talking about cinema reactions earlier on. You said that Jaws the Revenge, people were cheering. The moment where Thorwald, who did you say his name? Thorwald.
Yes.
He notices, Grace Kelly is like pointing to the ring on her finger to James Stewart's character, and then there's like close up of Thorwald's character, and he looks up at the camera, and it's the reveal. He notices James Stewart's character, and the reaction of all my classmates in the theater. I don't know if it was because they weren't expecting it. I don't know, because it's not as if it's a big reveal, but maybe it's just because it was that shock, that, oh my God, not only is James Stewart's character being revealed and in trouble, but now we feel as if we're in trouble because we've also been watching all the things that have been going on, and that reaction, I'll never forget it. And that made the film stick in my head and become immediately, maybe my favorite Hitchcock film. So yeah, I don't know if you have any similar experiences watching not only Rear Window, but any films like that where, a moment in the film happens and it immediately goes from, an okay film, a good film, to a great film, and one that you really, really love.
I love that you mentioned that moment. I really do, because, as I say, I've always known this film, but I've never seen it with an audience until I was in college, and it was shown to a class that I was in, a film studies class. And it was a type of introduction to film studies class. So most of the people, I think, had not seen Rear Window, but it was held, there was a screening of it. It was maybe a whatever it was, a VHS or Laserdisc screening, I forget exactly, but it was held in a type of theater for this group of students. And when that moment came up, the gasps,
yes,
and the, oh my gosh, those reactions it was electrifying. I had never fully appreciated the power of that particular moment until I was sitting in that audience and I heard the reaction, and I felt it too. Yes, that is a great moment. That's one of the all-time best moments of any Hitchcock film or any film period. Yeah. Well done, my friend. Yeah, that is a great moment to pick. Yeah.
That was the one that really, captured me and made me realize, this is a great film. And I knew it was a great film beforehand. He doesn't make bad films, but just in terms of, you're sitting there, you're waiting for something to happen, and it is quite late on, but wow, like that moment, it just changes everything. And then you don't know what's going to happen. It immediately becomes this thriller, because obviously then you see, Jeffries is on the phoning the police and phoning his friend or whatever, and you don't see what happens to Thorwald, and he leaves. And James Stewart's character doesn't know that he leaves, and of course he appears at his door. And that whole scene where he comes into the apartment, and it's like in darkness, it's like a silhouette, and he just looks huge and angry and dangerous. And you don't know. I mean, James Stewart's character believes that he's murdered his partner, but you don't know that for sure. You just assume that's what's happened because that's the narrative of the film. But it's just the way the silhouettes are shot, I thought was brilliant. He starts walking towards James Stewart's character. He does that flashbulb thing that really just, would blind anybody. And then, as Thorwald's character starts attacking James Stewart, I don't know if we were expecting something else to happen, but again, the reactions continued to go in the theatre that I was watching in, because we weren't sure what was going to happen. Were we about to watch, James Stewart's character be severely attacked, murdered? We didn't know what was going to happen. So, I can't express enough how much I love that kind of change in the film, where it goes from just this not one dimensional, that makes it sound bad, but one kind of theme, a murder mystery, you have your own opinion, to this drama that's happening right in front of you, where there's these two guys fighting in the apartment, and then of course he throws them out the window essentially. So it just develops into this real intense moment, and that's why I love this film a lot.
Oh, that's a really interesting thing, and that moment too, I think, is so key, because in many ways it's the moment where, one of the ways I think it's described is and again, please pardon me for my very poor way of trying to explain it, but it could be said that that's the moment where the film crosses over into the Z-axis. There is the X-axis and the Y-axis, and that is one way to describe dimensionality, and dimensionality of anything, right? The horizontal axis and the vertical axis. Here we have a moment where it crosses that and it goes into the third dimension in a way, because it's where this focus of our attention, who has up to now not necessarily known that he is the focus of our attention, now realizes that he is the focus of our attention, and thus he returns the gaze to us quite directly. He looks straight in at us. And so it really pierces the veil of what is coined in terms of voyeurism and the gaze, and the idea of the objective target of such gaze becoming or returning the gaze back, which is a very powerful and very unsettling feeling. But then the fact that it is powerful and unsettling then leads to the question, well, what have we been doing throughout the film up to this point, which then turns into this really fascinating discussion about the nature of voyeurism, and also the nature of cinema, and also the nature of this idea of examination of lives in terms of human drama. I mean, it's cloaked in this idea of storytelling and human awareness, beautifully dealt with in those terms. But then it really goes into this idea of, voyeurism, gaze, privacy. And these are very, very serious issues. And it makes us wonder, right? Why was that audience? Why are the audiences gasping? Why are they reacting in this way? And it leads to these wonderful, I think, discussions about just the nature of wanting to know about the other, but not wanting to be found out. But then when we get caught, what is that reaction? There's something very very, very fundamental about that, and that I think that's one of the great things about Hitchcock's films, is he seems to be able to capture in many ways the essence of that fundamentalness. It's called people describe it as psychology, human psychology. Those moments of human psychology where it's the fundamental, essential aspects of it, what it is to be human, being scared, being thrilled, when someone being ashamed or something. And he's able to capture these moments in this objective medium known as cinema, using these techniques, using a camera, using lenses, using whatever at his disposal. And he does it so brilliantly. And that is one of the prime examples of that. Well done. Yeah.
There's a documentary on that Masterpiece Collection edition. And someone says on it, it's about James Stewart's reactions is the key part to the film, essentially, because, you know, a lot of the first half of the film is you see James Stewart, you know, picking up his camera or you know, noticing one of the other neighbors and having a look. Then you see what the neighbor's doing, you see what he sees, and then you see his reaction. And I thought that was really interesting. I never thought about that before, that, you know, Hitchcock used James Stewart a lot. He loved James Stewart in his films. And, you know, as, you know, a young guy, I was like, why are they always picking the same actor? But it's mostly because these reactions that he gives are just spot on to what Hitchcock's looking for, because it's a very relatable reaction to us as the audience. What about James Stewart to you? Do you have any fond memories of James Stewart? You know, is he someone that you enjoy watching, or are you not too bothered?
Oh no, I think he is. I mean, he has this incredible. I mean, it seems this incredible charm, which is also combined with a sense of, shall I say, a sense of the unknown, which I think makes him, in many ways, one of the ideal leading men in the world of Hitchcock films. I mean, I think it's often described, he and Cary Grant are often mentioned as being the ideal Hitchcock leading man, each in his own way. They bring different say, traits to the table. So they aren't exactly the same. However, there is a certain similarity in that. Let's talk about James Stewart and his roles. Speaking about his roles with Hitchcock. Of course, his career is vast. What a vast, great filmography. But speaking of his films for Hitchcock, I mean, he provides such a range in terms of the types of characters that he's portraying. They are all still at the same time very much the essential or quintessential James Stewart types in terms of characters that seem to fit within what one can expect from a James Stewart performance. At the same time, each of those performances has a range that, I mean, each is so, I think, unique to that particular work. And each has a different type of characteristics. So I'm speaking of the films Rope, the Man Who Knew Too Much, the remake, right? The Rope, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Vertigo, Rear Window, right? So there is a difference in a type of tenor or a type of approach, but there's also similarities. And there's this idea too of James Stewart as being this the hero of the films. And indeed, he is the hero in each of the films, but there's also this undercurrent of danger. There's also an undercurrent of uncertainty. And also, when one watches and rewatches each of these films, even a film that maybe of the four or of the group, maybe that seems the most, say, quote unquote, morally upright, might be a film like, or his performance in his character in The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Yeah.
Even that performance, or that character, I should say, does have certain undercurrents of a type of, say, moral ambiguity, arguably, which I think bubbles up to the surface in many ways in these other films as well. Vertigo, definitely. Rope, and even Rear Window. Rear Window is a case where I think there's an undercurrent of a type of moral ambiguity by the very fact that he is a type of voyeur, and thus we are going along for that ride. So, I think that there is so much richness, and there's so much a type of multi-dimensionality to each of his performances that makes him very compelling.
Just in closing here, what would you say to someone who, you know, asked you about Rear Window? What does Rear Window mean to you in terms of a Hitchcock fan, a film fan, a James Stewart fan, but also if someone was to say to you, I'm about to watch this film, I've never heard anything about Rear Window, how would you best sum it up? What does it mean to you?
Oh, I think if if I had to recommend, okay, if someone said to me, Daisuke, I would like to watch a Hitchcock film. I've never seen a Hitchcock film, and chances are I will only have time to watch one Hitchcock film. I cannot watch all of his films. I can only watch one film by Alfred Hitchcock. Which film would you recommend? If someone were to ask me that question, I would answer Rear Window.
Interesting.
I think Rear Window is perhaps for me and for my money, it is perhaps the ultimate example of Hitchcock's cinematic craft. And when I say cinematic craft, I mean the total package of a Hitchcock film, I think, is embodied to the nth degree in Rear Window. Thus, I think Rear Window is the ultimate Hitchcock film experience. Now, is it my favorite Hitchcock film? Is it my favorite film? That's a different discussion. But if I had to pick one film that I feel best embodies what I understand to be the Hitchcock cinema aesthetic, it is Rear Window. No question, it is Rear Window. There are other films, of course, that embody that. Sure, of course, I get that. But just something that seems to tick all of the boxes every time. It's all there. It's all there in Rear Window.
I agree. Great. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Daisuke. I really appreciate your time. I know it's late where you are, so I appreciate your time. Tell the listeners and the viewers what you've got coming up on your channel. What can we expect to see on Daisuke Beppu's YouTube channel?
Oh, thank you so much, Chris, for this opportunity. It was a real pleasure, and I want to say, just before I go, I just want to say once again, thank you so much, and your enthusiasm is so wonderful. And I do want to say, I'm so sorry, I don't want to drag this out longer.
No, please.
So please edit this. But I do want to say too that your observations about Rear Window and other films, I think, are so important. These are really, really important, because watching a film for the first time is so powerful.
Yeah.
And these films have been spoken about, and they're classics, and they've been around for, right? And many people have seen them, they know, right? But I lament not being able to watch this film for the first time. You know what I mean? Yeah. I wish I could watch this for the first time. I wish I could, and have that, and then to get those experiences and to hear from you what it is you're drawn to. You said it so beautifully about what is the hook, what is the way into the film, and I thought that was such a great moment to pick. So well done. So I just want to applaud you for that great, how should I put it? That keen sense of observation, and that wonderful kind of curiosity going forward, and to deal with these films, and to try to engage with them, and then to share with us your reactions and observations. This is so important. So I want to thank you very much for that. Really, it's so valuable. I can't stress enough just how valuable it is. So please keep up that excellent work there, and of course with other films, and of course wrestling.
Yes, we can't forget about the wrestling. Of course, there always has to be a place on the channel here for me with wrestling talk. You have the Star Trek films coming up soon, though, right? On your channel. That's correct. Yes, it will be Star Trek. The first 6 films will be the topic of discussion for live streams. So starting with Star Trek: The Motion Picture in February, and so I love that film to bits. So I look forward to having the opportunity to share a little bit about why I feel that way in these live streams. Love that. That sounds great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening and for watching. I can't recommend Daisuke's channel enough. You'll be able to find the link wherever, the description box is for this video, but also for this podcast. So thank you very much for tuning in this week. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you all soon. Take care. Thank you.